and they can learn how effectively they manage it.
Dr. Oz returns to discuss the treatments for the coronavirus. Plus, Freedom Watch founder Larry Klayman sues China.
When we get a jury verdict, I'm confident this will go to a jury trial.
Why he says the country is to blame for the pandemic. I'm also discussing the coronavirus death numbers with Dr. Colby Grossman.
He could certify a death even without a diagnostic lab test for COVID-19.
And Assistant Secretary for Health Admiral Brett Giroir discusses the latest in the nation's efforts to fight the coronavirus.
We're on par to be somewhere in the 6 million tests per month range just in May.
That and so much more. Welcome to America This Week. I'm your host, Eric Bolling, coming to you from yet another restaurant closed indefinitely due to the coronavirus. Surmet's Courtyard on Daniel Island, Charleston, South Carolina. As always, on this show, I ask the tough questions that no one else wants to ask, and during this pandemic, it's more important than ever. There are just too many inconsistencies, folks. Maybe because I'm mad that we're taping yet another America This Week from a shuttered restaurant. A constant reminder of the devastation inflicted upon American life from a Chinese virus. Maybe I'm sick of being locked up in my own home, something I would never believe would be possible if someone said this a year ago. But here we are. Over the week, I've continued to research, to read, and to think about this virus a lot. It's just that there are too many healthy people dying from this coronavirus. It just doesn't add up to regular flu claims. If you take a step back, this is a very, very deadly virus, not just, quote, the flu. In December, when the virus was first discovered, China clamped down on information coming from Wuhan. That alone indicates they're hiding something. Doctors were silenced, labs were scrubbed, whistleblowers, real people, went missing. China is literally tampering with a crime scene. On this show, I've asked both Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx about the origin of the virus. They keep on saying it came from an animal, a bat, but that's not what I was asking. I don't doubt this disease started with the horseshoe bat. We already know that. The science proves that out. What I asked the top two virologists was, did the virus jump from animal to human in the wet markets of China? Or, what I believe happened, from bat to human in a Chinese biolab? Did you know the Wuhan biolab was cited by U.S. officials in 2018 for dangerous and risky practices of experimenting with this exact virus? As far back as 2014, the Chinese were actively increasing the potency of the horseshoe bat virus with a process called gain of function. In other words, the Chinese government is actively attempting to make a virus in a lab that's more deadly and contagious than a regular coronavirus. Why would the Chinese do that? It defies logic. Now listen carefully to this next statement. It's the reason we're sheltering in place, wearing masks to the grocery store, and doing TV shows from empty restaurants. While the world desperately works to develop antidotes to the many deadly viruses coming from China, the Chinese government is actively attempting to develop more deadly and contagious viruses. Now think about that for a moment. We need to shut down Chinese biolabs, period. We should try, but I highly doubt we'll be successful. We should try to get the Chinese to stop eating bats and exotic animals. That probably won't happen. But the biolabs, they must be shut down. The only way to do this is to punish China for the damage the viruses have caused. And furthermore, we should punish China for any further pandemic that starts in China, and punish China severely. China owes the U.S. trillions of dollars in restitution. And the lame duck WHO needs to get into China and shut down their virus production and amplification labs immediately, or risk a full defunding of the WHO budget from the U.S. and Europe and elsewhere. Lastly, a word to the PC crowd. It's the Wuhan flu. Too bad. It needs to be called the Wuhan flu. It's where it came from. It's not racist, it's geographical. Ebola came from the Ebola River. Zika came from the Zika forest. Hantavirus came from the Hantan River. West Nile virus, the Spanish flu, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, all name their origins. Hell, Lyme disease is named after a town in Connecticut. Candy coating it for the politically correct crowd makes it easier for China to deliver the next version of a deadly virus on the world. SARS, bird flu H1N1, Hong Kong flu, Asian flu, MERS, all started in China. We need to name the location in order to assign some responsibility to that origin. That's not racism, that's accountability. I need to know, it's the Chinese government who are to blame. It is them. It's not Chinese Americans. Let's not blame Chinese Americans for the sins of China. It's not their fault. No, I'm speaking of the communist China dictators. Those people, evil to their core. China, you owe us a few $1 trillion. Hopefully, we'll collect that debt as soon as our doctors, nurses, and first responders stop dying from your genetically altered virus. Yeah, China, you owe us big. Okay, let's welcome back to the show one of the most well-known physicians in the world, in the nation especially, Dr. Mehmet Oz, host of the Dr. Oz Show. Dr. Oz, thank you for joining us. You know, I just wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about this post, when we reopen the economy, what's life going to be like? If you don't mind, if can I run through a few things, you tell me what that might look like. Let's start with, say, a ball game. Will we go to ball games, and what will that be like?
I think players will be playing ball games. Whether spectators go or not is really dependent on personal preference to a large extent, because I think most Americans don't want to go to a large stadium event right now. This has been surveyed, and I'm reflecting what's being told to pollsters. That stated, people who are young, healthy, don't have major risk factors for viral illness might want to go to a ball game because they might want to have a good time. I wouldn't do it early, and I wouldn't do it on the coasts, which have been disproportionately hard hit by this virus.
Great, good point. Now, I'm in a vacant restaurant. When these restaurants do open, there'll be substantially fewer. And this is a small restaurant. There's maybe 40 or 50 seats in this restaurant in Sermet's here, as we said. What will it be like when we reopen? Will restaurant owners be forced to take out some seating?
I think when restaurants open, both to make the customers happy, but also to keep the place as safe as possible, you're going to want to screen customers, potentially with, for example, temperature monitors. That's one idea. Less tables for sure is a good idea. Within your table, you can't socially distance that well, but certainly between you and the tables around you, you ought to be able to keep a 6-foot distance. You might want to use products that are easily tossed away, like the menus. We're not going to be reusable like they often are in many restaurants. Some of these precautions are going to make sense. You can't wear a face covering because you're trying to eat food. So we're going to have to be thoughtful, and it's also about risk management. The people who go to a restaurant need to be those who are not at high risk if they do contract the virus, which is why before any of these normality discussions are had, we got to get serious on 2 topics. One, older folks with comorbid conditions, high blood pressure, diabetes, bad lungs, they don't want to take part in big public events right now because we don't have good treatments for you, and we can't prevent the illness with the vaccine. And secondly, we have to have testing. If you've got testing, you can get pretty comfortable about who's safe to sit in a restaurant with.
So, Doctor, you bring up a couple of points there, weren't on my list necessarily. Number one, if you're going out to dinner with friends, let's say, and someone says we're bringing someone who's, you know, elderly or comorbid, do we actually turn these down? Number one. Number two, are we going to be at a point where we're going to be testing people's temperatures as they come into a restaurant, a bar, a ball game, etc.?
Well, to answer the first question, because it's easy, I've already turned down meals with older folks, people who I jokingly would say, I don't want to take out 2 or 3 important Americans with one meal by infecting you all, because I'm a doctor. I get exposed to a lot of people. And I think most folks appreciate that. And I'm not saying forever. We're talking about till we get the vaccine, which could be a year from now, maybe less, who knows. And until we get better treatments to help you, if you were to get sick in the meantime, I don't want to risk you. Why would you want to risk you? And you know what? Even if you don't get sick, the thought that 4 days later, when you get a little sniffle, you might have the beginning of COVID-19, it messes up your day. So why take the chance at all when there's a possibility it may emotionally cause a little anxiety for you? With regard to testing for temperature and other ways, there's no reason not to make Americans feel more comfortable by at least checking our temperature. That's not a lot to ask. We're walking through a door. If someone's got a fever, pull them to the side and ask them if they're okay.
Yeah, great point. It's just a whole new world. I'm just trying to give us and our viewers a sense of what this new world, the new abnormal, so to speak. Is it going to be safe to date? I think about all these people who may go to a bar. You know, you don't know where these other people have been. Is the dating scene going to be completely dramatically changed going forward?
Well, I think dating will be impacted. You may recycle a little bit, go back to people that you've been with because you have a relationship already, and it's not going to be a 5-minute deal where you get infected but nothing else happens because there's no chemistry there. But I don't think it's wise for us to make people feel guilty about wanting to be in loving relationships. We want people to be able to live their lives. If you're, again, low risk and don't have any of the risk factors that tend to land you in hospitals, if you're wrong, you'll be sick for, a couple days, maybe longer. You're not going to be happy about it, but you're not in the hospital on a ventilator. And there's a big difference.
Dr. Oz, we're coming up to the season that a lot of parents send their kids away to sleepaway camp or to camp. Is it safe? Will it be safe to do that?
What we're going to know as we do testing on kids when they, in some states, go back to school. My thought process is that kids don't seem to contract the virus that often. They don't seem to infect others that often, from what we can tell. There was some interesting modeling done in the Lancet. They shared it. That calculated that the benefit of shutting schools down was maybe a reduction of 2 to 4% in the mortalities that suffered with COVID-19. So it may not be quite as bad as we expected. Why? Because unlike influenza, where kids get disproportionately hit hard and they have lots of virus coming out of all their orifices, it might be with COVID-19, kids are spared. So maybe it's not as bad a thing for them to be with other kids. If that's the case, if they're at a camp and they're socially distanced from the people who are at risk, their parents, their grandparents, and the like, it might be a reasonable move. But let's not do that all at once. I think this is the beauty of federalist system. The states that have not been hard hit ought to do the experiments, making sure that if there's a brush fire that blazes because of some outbreak of COVID-19, they know about it early, they deal with it quickly, and they can learn how effectively they manage it. If it's hard to manage, we don't do it. If they can take care of it easily, it gives other states comfort and the parents in those states to send their kids back to school or to camp.
All right, some awesome advice. Always Dr. Mehmet Oz, and again, that's the Dr. Oz Show. Always, I'd like to point out to our viewers, July 24th, National Tequila Day. Dr. Oz, maybe you and I will share a shot of tequila together in a healthier America. Thank you, Dr. Oz. Thank you so much for your time. Okay, Larry, let's bring you back in. A friend of the show, Larry. They presented me with this. It said Larry Klayman suing China. I said, let's get him on, number one. And number two, Larry, how do I join your lawsuit? I want to sue China with you.
Well, you can go to freedomwatchusa.org, freedomwatchusa.org. We've already got nearly 1,000 plaintiffs. It's going to grow. It's a lawsuit that I filed in Texas, a relatively conservative court, and we're asking for $20 trillion plus in damages for everything that's been done to the U.S., Eric. Why should the American taxpayer have to pay for this? This has already bankrupted our country. It's put us into a system of socialism where people are going to become dependent on the government dole, and our kids and grandchildren will be living in abject poverty. So the communist Chinese need to pay. It's not enough just to call it the Chinese virus. I'm sure you agree. We have to take action.
Oh, not only do I agree, I wrote a monologue about it and agree with you that they need to pay. They owe us trillions upon trillions. I'm not, and we'll talk about whether there's legal standing to be able to do this. But as far back, Washington Post this week published an article that stated as far back as 2014, it was noticed that China was developing, there's actually amplifying the contagion and the contagiousness of this virus, and also the death rate of the virus. I mean, this is worse than negligent. It might be bioterror. How do we distinguish this from a military response to a legal response? Larry, should it be military or legal or both?
Well, it should be both in some respects, but let's deal with the legal response first, is that there is no immunity. You suggested that because this is contrary to the Geneva Conventions and also the World Health Organization regulations. So they violated international conventions. China loses its immunity. When we get a jury verdict, and I'm confident this will go to a jury trial, there are hundreds of billions of dollars of Chinese assets invested in U.S. banks and securities, certificates of deposit and otherwise, and we can attach that. And one thing the president should be doing now, as we did with Iran, is freezing all of Chinese assets in this country so the American people can collect. Now, we've also filed a criminal complaint at the International Criminal Court. And although the United States and China are not signatories, that doesn't matter. The criminal court has worldwide jurisdiction. Years ago, they indicted, prosecuted, and convicted General Pinochet in Chile, who was the leader of Chile, and he would have gone to prison but for the fact that he died. And within 24 hours of my filing this complaint, I got a response from the International Criminal Court saying, we're processing your complaint. I've asked for an investigation. I asked that the Chinese leadership be indicted, tried, and convicted.
Right. So Larry, what happens in this? And my concern is it's one of the. This has happened before, where we'll bring a lawsuit against a country or a group. You win the lawsuit, but since there's no standing and there's no grounds for it, it's not the right venue, that they go, okay, I agree with you that creating some sort of public awareness program that China owes us money and they're doing things that probably most of the public doesn't realize they're doing will have a great effect. But is there actual legal standing to get some restitution from China?
There is. We've all been damaged, not by contracting the virus, and because of the damage to our lives in terms of our health and our work, losing jobs, losing businesses. The lead plaintiff in Dallas, Texas, is a photo shop named Buzz Photos.
How do we get them to pay?
Well, because the money has been invested. Chinese investment, hundreds of billions of dollars. It can be attached. In fact, with the litigation against Iran over the years before Obama released everything back to Iran, their assets were being attached and collection was occurring in this country for cases that were brought against the regime. So there's precedent. Now we need and pray that we have a judge that'll let this case go forward. And I believe that he or she will, because this is something that touches both liberals and conservatives and moderates. Everybody is affected. And this is not a question of Larry Klayman being a conservative or Freedom Watch or Eric Bolling or anybody. It's a question of our survival. And there's no reason why the American people need to pay for this. You know, the president.
Right.
War. That was a really good point. Well, it's time that this president also instruct his attorney general, who's done virtually nothing in bringing anyone to justice here on the various witch hunts and impeachments and everything else. They should be joining Freedom Watch in this case.
Thank you. We have a lot of these issues, and give us a break, folks. It's Skype. It's difficult. We're trying to separate distance. Larry Klayman, Freedom Watch. Just for the record, Larry, I think you're on the right case. You're on the right track, and I think there are a lot of our fans, people who watch this show across the country, agree with you. This isn't right, left. This isn't political. This is us versus them. America needs to be paid back from China. Larry Klayman, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. God bless you. Stay safe.
Ahead on America This Week. Are you concerned that you can get reinfected if you've already had coronavirus? And what about those antibody tests? Well, he's a doctor and a four-star admiral who's helping guide the nation through the coronavirus pandemic. Admiral Brett Giroir is here. You do not want to miss this interview.
America, one nation, from Florida to St. Louis to Seattle. America This Week, America's fastest growing political show, delivers rough and tumble political arguments.
On the left, this new embrace of socialism.
The whole thing is ridiculous.
Hard-edged opinions.
The media let Joe Biden get away with his first big lie.
They can come after me all they want, but they're going to have to kill me if they want me to stop defending the president.
Tough topic debates.
Destabilization in the Middle East, more chaos and more terrorism.
Unless we get away from all of this hatred, we're going to destroy ourselves.
We have to solve the border problems.
The wall is a big chunk of what we're talking about.
America This Week reveals the topics and issues that pulse throughout America. Investigates stories revealing toxic forever chemicals in water supplies.
My family was poisoned. My child was poisoned. I have been poisoned.
There he is, over here, straight ahead.
Chaos at the southern border.
Go, 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 go.
Cartels, rape, gangs, and violence.
So you guys are both hitmen?
America This Week investigates the facts and the falsehoods and relentlessly seeks the truth on your behalf.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America This Week. Well, again, America This Week, we broadcast across the country. We are fortunate to have Admiral Brett Giroir. He is basically on the coronavirus task force, charged with the testing. It's all about testing. Admiral, tell us the state of testing, not only testing for the virus, but also testing for the antibody. Where do we stand?
Well, thank you for having me. As you know, testing is ramped up in really an unprecedented way with over 3.2 million tests as of yesterday, and most of those just in the last 3 weeks. We continue to increase our surge capacity for that. We have 350,000 per week point-of-care tests through the Abbott machines. Hospitals are ramping up, and we're on par to be somewhere in the 6 million tests per month range just in May. So that's looking really very good. And it's not 20 million or 50 million a month, but that 6 or 7 million a month is absolutely enough for us to do all the contact tracing surveillance that we would need to gradually reopen the economy. In terms of antibody testing, that's something very exciting on the horizon and on the very near-term horizon, as opposed to the tests we've done till now, which diagnoses the fact that you have the virus. Antibody testing will tell you if you have had the virus and are presumably immune. This is a much quicker, more standard technology that the moment they are approved and validated, and we expect that to be pretty soon to receive emergency use authorization for several tests. There will be tens of millions of those available per month. This is a finger stick. It's not a Q-tip up the nose like you have it right now, but it's a finger stick blood test that'll be available with the result in just a few minutes.
You know, and let me ask you about this very, very quickly. I want to move on to some other things, but on this antibody, a couple quick questions a lot of people ask. Once you have the antibody, you've had coronavirus, can you get it again? How long does the antibody stay in your system? If we do get a recurrence of a pandemic or epidemic, will the antibody protect you second time around? And the second one, I had heard that there was a saliva antibody test. Where are we on both of those questions?
So the first group of questions is really important. This is a brand new virus that no human being has ever seen before. So based on the science and our knowledge of similar viruses, if you have an antibody and have had the virus, it is highly unlikely that you would get it again. But we can't say never, and we can't say 100% because we don't know that. So clearly when we're testing people for the antibody, in all likelihood, you will be immune to getting it again. But we have to test that, and we need to follow people who are antibody positive to make absolutely certain that that's the case. And we don't know if it lasts forever, right? It may last for only a few years, but hopefully within that time period, I am really certain we'll have a vaccine and can move forward. In terms of the salivary work, there was one emergency use authorization from one university test that does that does a salivary kind of test. That test looks pretty good, but it's not at very large scale right now, and it uses some very specific reagents that we don't think we could just substitute all the other tests for saliva. The best tests right now overall are still the nasal swab or the nasopharyngeal swab. The nasal swab is much better because it's much more comfortable, and you could actually do it to yourself under supervision.
And Dr. Giroir, the very quickly on this subject, again, so many questions. There are rumors, could be rumors, any foundation in these rumors that there's already a second or a third strain of COVID-19 that may be developing where we could get reinfected if we've already been infected.
To our knowledge, and there's been very sophisticated sequencing, so DNA sequencing of the coronavirus that's out there, we do not see any new strains. This is not a virus like influenza. As far as we know, influenza, you have millions of mutated viruses in you at one time. It's a highly mutating virus, which means every year you need a different vaccine. At this point in time, we don't see any evidence of that with the current coronavirus. There's some moderate, baseline mutations, but nothing that you wouldn't expect to see. And we do not see any reemergent strains that would, infect you a subsequent time. That's just not on the radar screen right now.
Admiral and Dr. Giroir, I have this question for you. I've been last few weeks on China. I'm talking about the wet markets, the biolabs in China. Now, because of what I'm seeing young, healthy people dying. I'm seeing bodies lined up. I'm seeing people that you've never seen before dying. and I know this is not what you're charged with, but you're a friend of mine. I've known you a while. You're a great doctor. You're a great virologist. It just feels to me, and I'm not a statistician, I'm nothing more than an observer of life. This virus feels to me that it was more engineered than simply someone eating a bat in China in a wet market and it jumping from animal to human. Is this an engineered virus, in your opinion?
From what I see, there's no fingerprints of it being engineered by humans. In other words, there's no fingerprints of it being actively genetically manipulated or pieces being put together. There are signatures of that, and I have not seen any evidence of that. It does not mean that this native virus, that this dangerous virus, wasn't in a lab somewhere and got out. But it looks like a natural virus, very similar to other coronaviruses. And, you know, the wet markets are really just a petri dish for all kinds of awful things to happen, because humans and exotic animals and various forms of animals are brought together in very close quarters, and that is just a time bomb ready to go off. And how many times have we seen that already explode already? So I think we really need to be very active about, and I want to be respectful of everyone's culture and all of that. But, you know, when you have something that could literally wipe out the world's population, I think you need to take that seriously, and there needs to be some collective action.
Absolutely. Admiral Brett Giroir, MD, doctor, also Assistant Secretary of HHS America. Look at that man. We're lucky to have that guy at the spearhead of the fight against coronavirus. Admiral Giroir, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, let's bring in Dr. Colby Grossman. Full disclosure, my doctor down here in South Carolina. Colby, tell us a story. You had sent me something during the week regarding how you're being told to classify deaths, mortality, in your practice and doctors around the state. Tell us what that's all about.
So that's a great question, Eric. So yeah, this all came down from the CDC, and it kind of blew up last week with Scott Jensen's letter he got from the Minnesota Department of Health. And basically, it said that he could certify a death even without a diagnostic lab test for COVID-19. So that was very concerning. That edict came down from the CDC's National Vital Statistics System. Now, the rationale for that is because what that's going to end up doing, of course, is going to increase the number of COVID-19 deaths that are documented by the CDC. So I guess the rationale for that is we would have to go backwards and figure out why the CDC wants more COVID deaths documented than might be absolute. In other words, there might be some presumptive or likely causes of death that would be. And you know, the rub on that, I think, is that from a political standpoint, they actually think potentially maybe that it could have been driven by some political means. If you have more COVID deaths, then you may potentially be able to get more COVID money. So that was the ultimate conspiracy theory. And whether or not that's true or not, I don't really know. That's probably more for you to find out than me. But obviously, if money's involved, the more numbers you have, obviously, if funding's related, then that would be concerning. So that's my concern. And I've never filled out a death certificate in a manner of likely or presumed. It's more of a precise document.
Right. Okay. Yep. That's it. We're going to leave it right there, Colby. Thank you so much. Okay, let's bring in Dr. Sebastian Gorka and Amisha Cross from the right and from the left, respectively. Guys, this week we found out that Barack Obama decided to throw his weight behind the candidate, Democrat candidate Joe Biden. I'll start with you, Amisha. Your thoughts on what took him so long?
First of all, this is an extremely exciting time for Democrats. It's an endorsement that we've been waiting on for a while now. And I would frame it differently. I don't think that it took him long. I think that he fell back on what traditionally presidents do. They don't endorse until there is a nominee that is officially announced. With Bernie Sanders being still in the race for so long, you weren't going to expect, and nobody who has followed this race expected Barack Obama to come out and endorse while Bernie Sanders was still there. That would only increase the rifts that many already see in the Democratic Party. It made more sense for Bernie to bow out gracefully and endorse Biden first.
Sebastian, do you think, and there's a lot being made of his awareness, let's be honest, I'm being very frank here. Joe Biden has tendencies that he forgets where he is sometimes. Sometimes he forgets what he's saying. At one point, he forgot what he was running for. Does the Barack Obama endorsement put Joe Biden back on track?
Not at all, Eric. And first things first, what an embarrassment. Obama waits until there are no other candidates left to endorse the only candidate who's actually left standing. This is the man who was his vice president. I'm responding right now. Okay, Amisha, you had your say. Now it's my say. This is the man who was
you
vice
also have to know that
president
conservatives have not jumped out
Obama
historically and endorsed before somebody was the essential
Were you asked
candidate.
the question, Amisha,
Conservatives
or was
also have
I?
not done it.
Was I asked the question, or were you? I mean, classic liberal.
These are fallacies. If you're not going to be honest about it, then what is the point?
No, you get to decide what
right,
is,
guys,
right? Because you have monopoly on the truth. Classic liberal, shutting somebody else down. That is your latent dictatorial tendencies, and you need to get over
that. Is what your current president does when he is asking
Obama's
all right, guys. I will give you each other. I will give you each other's phone numbers to take this up after the show. But Sebastian, finish the thought on whether or not Joe Biden should have gotten President Obama's endorsement earlier. Go ahead.
This is the man who was his vice president for 8 years, Eric. What a farce. What a farrago that he waits until there's nobody else left. It's an embarrassment. And not only that, Eric, watch the video of Obama. Have you ever seen such a low energy video? It's like Jeb Bush. That's the kind of endorsement you don't want to have because it's so low energy. It's pathetic and it makes no difference at this point. And you're right. Biden doesn't know who his wife is, doesn't know who his sister is, doesn't know whether he's running for the Senate or the presidency. It's a laughing stock, and it's an indictment of the DNC.
Well, let me ask you, Amisha, Joe Biden's having a hard time, and this may be the thing he needs, but then we fast forward to presidential debates. Obama's not going to be able to be in his ear, I don't think. He's not going to be able to have Obama to lean back on. Does Joe Biden really stand a chance against Donald Trump in these debates? I mean, I'm looking at two vastly different human beings.
I'm looking at two people who are running on record. If we're talking about, and we're doing strictly on the record for President Trump, we're right now going through an American crisis. We are in crisis mode, and we're watching a president unhinged attack the media left, right, and sideways in the middle of what we're seeing in this country that we've never actually seen before. When a nation is waiting on the president to act and respond to save lives, we're watching him attack the media instead. And I think that the American people are definitely going to remember this come November.
All right. I got to leave it right there because we're all about COVID-19 right now, but this is definitely going to be a hot topic going forward. We can say thank you to Misha Cross and Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Thank you guys as always.
Thanks, Eric.
Coming up next, we continue to answer your questions by taking them directly to some of the best experts in the country. Doctors Dave Campbell and Gary Applebaum have the answers to your questions. Stay with us. We're still listening, and we hear you. Keep calling. We had over 500 calls last week. 888-601-0032, toll free. You can ask questions for our experts, rant about anything, and generally just let us know what your opinions are so we can make sure they hear you too. Here are some of the hundreds of calls that poured in over the week.
I love your show, and I'm very interested in tonight's episode where you're talking about the China connection. Is China guilty of spreading the virus? Is it made in a lab? Is it from a wet market? And what I would really like to see your show broadcast a little bit more or talk about is let's bring back Made in America.
We need to start taking those people that are in those categories that are not affected or those that have already been infected and now carry a certain amount of protection with them. We need to start having them go out and start going out and getting paid to work in agriculture
Here's that number again, 888-601-0032, toll free. It's your turn. It's your time to be heard, folks. Follow me on Twitter at Eric Bolling or ericbolling.com, and we'll make sure they hear you too.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand. Ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, American strong. City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand America. United we stand. We stand America. United we stand.
Okay, let's welcome back Dr. Dave Campbell. He's the chief medical correspondent for MSNBC's Morning Joe, a good friend of mine. Also, Dr. Gary Applebaum, the national medical director for Seasons Hospice and Palliative Care. Thank you, guys. Let's start with, we have a lot of questions from you from various sources. One viewer called in and had this question. Take a listen.
Hi, my name is Linda Anderson. I live in Port Hadlock, Washington. And I know that in about January 5th or 6th, I was sick, so sick for like about a month. And I'm just one of those that I didn't go to the doctor. But I wonder, could we have had the coronavirus sooner than what they have talked about?
You know, Dave, and this is a very, very common question from people coming up to me. My wife believes she had it as well before anyone heard about coronavirus, or at least certainly coming here. What is the earliest that we think possibly coronavirus, COVID-19, could have shown up here, Dave?
We do know that, Eric. January 15th, the first patient that was tested positive a few days later showed up in the airport in Washington, the state of Washington, from Wuhan. That patient survived. But that's the first known patient mid-January. So to answer the viewer's question, it would seem very unlikely that if you were sick in early January that you, in fact, had COVID-19.
Hey, Gary, do you also in your practice, do you see that some of the elderly people that you're taking care of, maybe they were sick? Can we put that in that just the flu category?
Sure. Sure. I mean, there's so many different things that people get in January that we're really not concerned. I would agree with Dr. Campbell that we don't think it was here in early January. Certainly in February, but not that early.
All right, let's go to the next question, guys. Studio, let's use Twitter user Ellen asks, what about prednisone? Dave, let me talk about prednisone is used, I guess, to shrink some swelling in the bronchial tubes in the lungs. Will prednisone help people who are violently ill from COVID?
That is a controversial question and answer, Eric, because there was one group of studies that came out suggesting that it should not be used in the severe and critically ill patient with COVID. But then there's a whole host of other studies suggesting that it should. And so I reached out to Dr. Leslie Diaz, our infectious disease expert in Palm Beach County. And she said, use good judgment, use it when it's needed, use it in low dose, use it early. But once you get into the ARDS, which is the acute respiratory distress syndrome, it can confuse the issue. Another expert from Mount Sinai told me that it may also lower the clearance of COVID. So you may have more difficulty getting rid of the disease. That's a very good question. Should be left to the ICU doctors and the pulmonary specialists.
All right, let's go on to the next
concur
one.
with that. Yeah.
Mark, I just wanted Gary, I'm sorry, Gary, very quickly. Working Joe says the common cold, will that make contracting COVID-19 more deadly? Gary, you take that one.
Excellent question. It's so important to think about it. What we always say is the common cold. There are certain viruses, rhinovirus, that's your nose, flu viruses and coronaviruses that are milder. That is not this. And that is not something that generally kills people. The COVID is clearly more deadly. However, it's extremely important for us to realize that, for example, they just did a study in a hospital in New York, 30 women coming in to deliver babies. 2 of them, 30 women had the virus, 2 got a fever. All were fine, all delivered healthy babies. The point I want to make is over probably half the people that get corona never know it. Maybe a quarter will get sick, 10% need a hospital, but we're going to find that less than 1% die. So America really needs to understand that, yes, it's more deadly than the common cold. But the reason we've distanced is to stop the spread and protect people who are more sensitive to it. But when we get out, I think we need to have a new term, social closening. When we get to social closening, we don't want to be fearful. We'll take certain precautions. We'll watch out for the elderly. But yes, it's more dangerous, but let's put it in perspective so that there's not fear out there.
Social closening. All right, control room, I'm going to skip Doug. I want to go to the next one. Type your name is the name of this one, because this is very interesting. I think this is very smart. I'll start with you, Dave. Is the medical community going to get more active to free up the supply chains, especially the medical supply chains? Right now, we're indebted to China and India for getting most of our meds, whether it's PPE or medicines. Are you, doctors, going to push back on China and India for being so integral in our supply chain for medical supplies and drugs?
In the short term, absolutely not. We want everything we can get in this pandemic from anybody that can give it to us. In the longer term, we absolutely need to prepare. We need to shift to things made in America for reasons of supply chain, quality, speed, assuredness that we have the drugs, tests, and equipment. Right now, no. As soon as this pandemic starts to ease off, absolutely, Eric, we need American-made stuff in the United States.
So, Gary, let me ask you this. As a question came up earlier.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say at the same time, supplies have been a problem, but let's celebrate the American healthcare system. What we've done has been remarkable. And, whether it's the staff, the hospitals, we are blessed. And I think when we ultimately study this, we will find that the American healthcare system has done a tremendous job compared to all other systems in the world. So supplies have been a problem. We'll address it, but let's celebrate what we're accomplishing.
Gary, let me start with you on this one. We only have about a minute or so, guys, so divvy up this time, Gary.
Sure.
Earlier in the show, Dr. Oz said that he's concerned about the older generation, people above 70-plus years old, maybe with comorbidities, and he doesn't want them around him and his family. That seems a little harsh. I mean, maybe it's the right thing to do. We've also had a well-known host recently say that the people who are dying were going to die anyway. Can you give us perspective on people 70 and older, how we should think about them, how we should treat them, and what's going through their minds?
Right. Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's the kind of patients I take care of all the time. And we need to remember, everyone over 70 is different. When we're looking at very frail patients, those in nursing homes, we're going to have to be more careful for a while. We're going to have to wash our hands. We're going to have to be very careful that if we have symptoms, we're not near these folks. That's until we get a vaccine and until we have medication. So I would concur that we're going to be careful. But again, most Americans won't have these issues, and we're going to get out, but we are going to have to be protective of our most frail until we really have a better way to treat the virus and prevent it.
Right. All right, I'm going to have to leave it right there. Dr. Dave Campbell, again, MSNBC's Morning Joe. Best to Rest to Mika and Joe, my friends, and also Gary Applebaum. Thank you both, doctors, very much. We'll get you guys back ASAP. Welcome. Just ahead, a vaccine against COVID-19. One doctor says there could have already been one by now. His shocking testimony to Congress and why he says Big Pharma may not be the solution.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand. United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand. Ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, American strong. City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand America. United we stand. We stand America. United we stand.
A potential vaccine against the coronavirus has already started clinical trials, but it could still be up to a year before there's a reliable option. That's frustrating for a renowned expert who says his team could have already had a vaccine moving through the process as far back as 2016. Josie Sturman with Spotlight on America digs into the holdup.
Had we had those investments early on, we could have had a vaccine ready to go.
One of America's leading vaccine experts dropping a stunner on Capitol Hill. With the number of coronavirus cases skyrocketing around the globe, Dr. Peter Hotez told congressional lawmakers his team was close to a vaccine that likely could have protected millions of people years ago.
But we couldn't move it into the clinic because of lack of funding, because by then nobody was interested in coronavirus vaccines.
After the global SARS outbreak in 2003, Hotez says researchers joined together to develop a vaccine to prevent the disease, which is in the same family as COVID-19. This coronavirus he calls SARS-2, and Hotez believes their vaccine could potentially fight it.
Is it too late for them to use what you've already developed and researched?
No, I think now we could still repurpose our vaccine to fight SARS-2, but it's a matter of getting the funding to move it now into clinical trials.
He's looking for money to make it happen, but Hotez says Big Pharma typically hasn't been a big player in developing vaccines for diseases like coronavirus.
We haven't quite figured out a system in place where we make vaccines that don't offer financial return, even though they're huge public health return.
That's why Hotez says big pharma and biotech firms have to be incentivized to get in the game before a crisis, something members of Congress have also discussed.
Unfortunately, the lessons aren't learned because, people said, well, after SARS in 2003, well, this will provide an autocorrection each time it doesn't correct. So I can't say that even after this one we'll see any game-changing policies.
Still, this doctor, who has long championed research into rare diseases, has learned not to give up hope.
I've always pursued science with a humanitarian mission.
And you still hope you can save lives in this one?
I hope so. I hope so.
I'm Josie Sturman for Spotlight on America.
Dr. John Lott is the founder and president of the Crime Prevention Research Center and is an expert on the Second Amendment. I spoke with him recently about the nation's need for firearms during COVID-19. Watch. You make a very important point. It is one of the protected amendments in the Constitution, the right to keep and bear arms, but not necessarily the right to be able to purchase arms. Distinguish the two if you don't mind.
Well, it's kind of hard to distinguish the two. If you're not able to go and purchase them, it's going to limit many people's ability to be able to go and have a gun for protection. And I think some of the lawyers who have been advising these politicians have begun to tell them otherwise, that if they go and make it so that people can't go and buy a gun in times of crisis like this, then they're effectively denying people the ability to go and defend themselves and their families.
Yeah, and I think you make a very good point. I mean, you look at some of the businesses that are, at least as of this airing, still open. I get it, and you have to pick and choose which ones are essential. So, food, gotcha. Banking, gotcha. But then you say something like construction. Construction sites are still open. Absolutely essential, I'm not sure. I would even say getting my firearm, being able to put ammunition in my firearm, far more essential than making sure my house is being built. Am I wrong?
I understand exactly what you're saying. Look, even with the businesses that are open, you can still take precautions. People can still engage in social distancing. You can still go and disinfect and go and have other protective type measures that you can take. So, but look, I'm not really sure how else you're going to be able to make sure that people get ammunition and guns. We've seen a huge increase in ammunition purchases over the last month or so. Ammo.com reported in the last 3 weeks they had over a 300% increase in ammunition purchases compared to the preceding 3 weeks.
Watch my entire interview with Dr. John Lott on our Facebook page. Just go to facebook.com/AmericaBowling, all one word. Every week, we honor first responders who died in the line of duty protecting our great country. Captain Jonathan Parnell of the Detroit Police Department died in late March after contracting COVID-19. He was with the police department for 31 years. Captain Parnell is survived by his 3 sons. In March of this year, Deputy Sheriff Kenteris Taylor of the Bibb County Sheriff's Office in Georgia was killed in a vehicle crash while responding to a burglary. Deputy Taylor served with the Bibb County Sheriff's Office for a year and was previously with the Fort Valley State University Police Department. He is survived by his father. Rest in peace, officers.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand. Ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, American strong. City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one
And before we go, here's something that caught the attention of America this week, something we should all be doing, applauding our healthcare workers. New York City firefighters hit the sirens and applause for the healthcare workers at Brooklyn Hospital. Staff there have been handling large numbers of coronavirus patients. Similar shows of thanks have been happening across the nation and the world, for that matter. For those hospital workers on the front lines, boy, don't they deserve it in this fight. Well, we asked you on Facebook, what's the first thing you'll do once the stay-at-home orders are lifted? Well, here's some of your responses. David Perez said he'd go to see a movie or a ball game. Beverly Bailey says she'll go out and eat and sit in a nice restaurant. Now, that's definitely on the list. In the meantime, remember, some of your favorite restaurants are still offering curbside to go or delivery, so you can still support them right now. And Diane Fox says she plans to go trail riding and camping with horses and friends. So tell us your plans. Just go to facebook.com/AmericaBowling, all one word. Well, thanks for joining me from, again, a safe social distance. And a special thanks to Sermet's Courtyard in Charleston for hosting me again this week. Remember, you can support more than restaurants during this time. Can't go for a haircut? See if you can buy a gift card from your favorite barbershop or salon. Need some clothes? Find a local store and order online. As a nation, we can offer a lot of support for our crucial brick and mortar shops, even if we can't enjoy the insides of their stores right now. It's those small businesses that keep the nation running, folks. Remember them. Tonight, we leave you with a new version of Adele's Hello from singer Chris Mann. Now, he changed it just a little, but it's pretty darn good. Take a listen.